Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. My name is Monica Remy. I am the Tech Employer Specialist for Northern Kentucky and the greater Cincinnati area. I'm glad to have you here tonight for our guest speaker series. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes just to mention. If you are in modular, if you are attending this class as part of your career readiness requirements, please remember to fill out the form in your Google Classroom to get credit for attending. That's important. You need to make sure you fill out the form in your Google Classroom to get credit for attending this event. We have some exciting speakers coming up over the next few weeks, all the way through, Monday, November 4th. We have somebody scheduled each and every Monday. Topics include mitigating cyber threats in the financial world, black hat hacking, and emerging technologies. Keep an eye on Slack and your email for further information and updates from your career team. One last item, please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation unless otherwise directed. You are welcome and encouraged to use the chat for questions and comments, and we will plan to have time for Q&A at the end of the session. Tonight, we're joined by Jared Mueller and Amanda Gearhart for a discussion about how to study and learn. And with that, I will turn it over to Jared and Amanda. Take it away, guys.
I'm really looking forward to some of those other guest speakers that are coming up, and Black Hat Magic and such. It sounds like great things. So welcome tonight. We'll go ahead and jump right in. I'm Amanda Gearhart, the Eastern Kentucky SOAR Region Community Coordinator.
And I'm Jared. I'm the Northern Kentucky region, and I also handle the Bluegrass region, the student community coordinator for those regions.
So today, we thought we would go over the key topics in Andrew Huberman's podcast, Optimal Protocols for Studying and Learning. And so like the first question I kind of have here is, how many people listen to this podcast?
One of the mentors shared it, I think, in Slack. So we were just kind of curious if anyone had listened to it before this.
Well, we'll go over the key topics in this podcast. It was over an hour long. And for me, an hour on a podcast is that's a little bit much. But then we'll look at ways we can incorporate his tools into your studies, and then open up a discussion about your experience with CodeU and have an opportunity to network with your classmates.
Yeah, so we watched this podcast from Andrew Huberman, who is a professor at Stanford, and this is kind of an overview of everything he talked about in the podcast. We're going to kind of go through some of these things a little bit more in depth, but he talked about the science of learning. He gives us some tools to optimize your learning. We talked about some study habits of successful students. And then some other key components to learning that people don't always think of while they're actually studying, and then we'll recap it all at the end. So first thing that we wanted to kind of do was to see and ask you guys why you are here. What is your why? And then also, what kind of learner do you think you are right now? So if you could in the chat drop like a B, C, or D of why you joined CodeU, why you're here, and then a 1, 2, 3, or 4 of what style of learner you think you are. And if you're more than one, go ahead and put more than one letter. But we just kind of wanted to see what everyone thinks where they're at right now, or see.
All of the above.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I think originally when I signed up to take CodeU, it was about advancing skills and probably more money. Always more money, right?
Always more money.
Yeah.
And I think I've always been told I was kind of a visual learner. I have to see things in order to process them.
I always thought I was reading and writing, but sometimes I wonder about that a little bit. I do really well when I can be hands-on with things. And
I'm with that, with like carpentry and things like that. Yeah.
And maybe in some regards, it's like, dependent on the situation and what you're trying to learn.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, well, looks like we've got a lot of answers in the chat. I see a lot of B's and a lot of more monies. So this is great. Thank you all for participating. So something that Huberman says, or according to Huberman in the research that he looked at, the best way to study and learn is not actually defined by the medium. So whether you're visual, audio, tactile, things like that. But the key to learning is to access components of your memory system that offset forgetting. So another way is, don't think of studying as trying to retain information. Think of studying as a way to inoculate against forgetting. So that's a kind of a really fancy way to say, when you sit down to study, don't ask yourself, how am I going to memorize all of these things, all of these codes, all of these, all this language, everything like that. Instead, ask yourself, how can I keep myself from forgetting this? That little shift in your thinking opens up your brain to making new neural connections, as we'll learn about later. And it opens your mind to having new perspectives thrown at you that you weren't thought of or accustomed to in the past. So to kind of do this or see how this works, we've got to learn what learning is.
So yeah. Am I doing this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the podcast, Huberman goes into the science behind learning, and he has lots of episodes where he talks in great detail about neuroplasticity. But that is the main point in this: is learning is based on neuroplasticity. It's your nervous system changing in response to an experience. He says, Jared and I, we talked about this earlier, 3, but it's actually 4 mechanisms, right? When we look at this, the strengthening connections between neurons and formation of new connections, we think that those are 2 different things, or can be counted as 2 methods. So, and then the weakening of the connections between the neurons isn't necessarily losing a skill, it's just developing the pathways in a different way. So, but his focus really is on offsetting the forgetting. And so how do we offset, both the strengthening connections and weakening are to offset the forgetting. So what tools do we use to do that? Sorry.
And so he calls this a tool, but I kind of think of it more as setting yourself up to be successful while learning. But in his podcast, he talks about how converting studying efforts into knowledge, retained knowledge, is a 2-step process. And you have to do these 2 things in order to be able to basically retain or learn anything. The most important tool that he starts with is active engagement. So you have to actually be attentive and focused on the material that you're learning. Something that he says in the podcast is, you can't expect the material to be so interesting that it grabs your attention and pulls it out of you. Coding isn't like that. You are not always going to be, the most interested or entertained by what you're learning. But something that he says you can do, and that we'll talk about a little bit later, is that you can voluntarily ramp up your level of focus and alertness by telling yourself that something is important, and also by building that structure of studying into your day, into your week, and by doing it at a consistent time every day, consistent, weekly, over a period of time, your body will actually train itself to want to learn or to be ready to learn. So active engagement, being focused and attentive in what you're doing, and actually putting effort into the learning he'll talk about later, but the hard things that are hard to learn, you actually learn them more because of your active engagement. And then the second thing that he talks about for setting yourself up to be a successful learner is adequate sleep. So REM sleep.
Raise your hand if you get enough sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're a parent or you're trying to do a full-time job and learn this as well, it can really be detrimental to your learning if you don't build in time to sleep adequately and structure your day to get. He recommends between 6 and 8 hours of sleep. Some people really function well on 4 hours of sleep. So anywhere between 4 to 8 hours of sleep that you can get, it will actually help your learning process.
Okay. All right. So another one of his big recommendation is non-sleep deep rest. And at one point it says the podcast recommends doing this before you start studying. And then there's another document from Huberman that I'll share with you later where it says to do it after. So I think really the point with this is to incorporate this non-sleep deep rest, also known as yoga nidra, or you can do different videos to help those connections reorder and form between your sessions of studying. So I don't know, is anybody doing non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, or yoga nidra? Jared, you are?
It wasn't called that. It was called just guided meditation. And, when I was in college, we had a psychology professor, no, philosophy professor, we would meditate before class, and then we'd take a quiz at the end of class. And it always seemed to really work and help retain information. So just bringing some knowledge back to current times, it seems that the research has shown that meditation and non-sleep deep rest can really help set the stage for your learning or solidify it after. So if you're not getting enough sleep, definitely make sure that you can find 10 minutes for meditation in your day.
Yeah. And I think if you look at some of the other research too, you will find that this kind of non-sleep deep rest, meditation, all of those types of things are good for not just studying and learning, but all kinds of healthy mental health habits. So yeah, doesn't hurt. So now, so the best tool that Huberman puts out there is self-testing. So the most effective thing you can do is stop and test yourself. It helps you to retain and use that information later. And you want to do that periodically to help solidify the knowledge of what you're learning.
Yeah, this was the biggest portion of Huberman's podcast and how important testing is and self-testing when you're learning.
And self-testing to offset the forgetting.
Yeah, offset the forgetting, as he calls it.
Yeah.
Yes, as the next slide I think will show, there was a lot of research that was around, I think, medical students, and they had them read a topic and then take a test. And then they had another group that would read the topic over and over and over again, and then they take the test. And research consistently showed that people who read the material once and then took the test retained information and did way better than people who read the material over and over and over again and then took some sort of test. So I'll let Amanda kind of read the slide here, but testing is so important.
Yeah. So whenever you learn a new concept, you take some time to write some code and test it out, see if it works. It doesn't work. When it doesn't work, then that is a better way. I don't know. He says getting things wrong is necessary to learning. So, testing things makes you, and getting it wrong makes you more likely to remember it. So
'Cause you're not going to get that wrong again in the future. If there is, I don't know much about, I'm not a trained coder, but if, you put something in the wrong spot and it doesn't work, you're going to know not to do that again the next time around, at least hopefully.
yeah. So we had a hand raised. I'm not sure if that was an accident or Okay. So anyway, so when retaining information, recognizing those errors, other best test strategies would be using open-ended questions, short answers, or having minimal prompts. And I can think of plenty of examples of ways you could incorporate that with this program. I'm sure you can think, oh, we learned a little bit about this language, and so I want to see if I can use that to write some code to solve this problem that I have. So, those are kind of open-ended ways of testing yourself. And then, of course, with the mentors and the community we have, I think that's where oh, no, not quite yet. They can help you work through some of the issues that you may run into. So anyway, Jared, anything else on there?
No, just don't be afraid as you get into your pathway and you start diving really deep into your coding language. Don't be afraid to test, what you're trying to do, to write some code as small, as simple as it can be and test it. And if it's wrong, don't, get down on yourself or give up, because you're actually learning more by getting things wrong. So, according to Huberman.
Yeah.
So some study habits of the most successful students. In the podcast, he talks about medical students, but we feel that this kind of applies to every type of learner. So the most successful study habits of the most successful students were they scheduled time to study. It wasn't just when they had a free moment here or there. They actually put it on their calendar. They told their friends and family they were unavailable. They put their phone away, which kind of goes into the second bullet point of eliminating distractions. They turned off the TV. He talks about the most successful students isolated themselves when they were learning, but we think that was more from family, not from fellow students, because as you'll see on the last point here, the most successful students in this study made an effort to teach fellow classmates. So we'll go deeper into that in a second, but I skipped over one bullet point. Studying a consistent amount of time every day, at least 5 days a week, made a huge difference in folks' ability to retain information. So scheduling time to study, eliminating distractions, consistent study habits and patterns, and making an effort to teach someone else. Because in this program, you don't just learn from, the plural sites, from your mentors, you learn from each other. Each other are your best resources. So in the podcast, Huberman has this motto that we hope you kind of take with you. It was watch one, do one, teach one. So when you're watching a Pluralsight video, only watch it once. Then try and do an example of something that was shown in the video or a concept that was presented. Try and do one on your own. And then take the step further to bring it to class and share your screen during class to hopefully teach others, or form study groups with other students so you can show them what you've learned, because you're all learning the same things. You're in this together. And I think Amanda had a question for you all here.
Yeah. How many students have shared their screen in class?
Show of hands if anyone has done that yet.
Or a thumbs up?
Or a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up is probably
okay.
easy. Yeah.
Love
And do we have any current mentors? I don't know if we have any current mentor. We do have throughout the classes, we have student mentors as well as professional mentors, a mix of both. Has anyone here participated in a study group? I think there's probably fewer of those going on right now.
So when you get in your pathway, within that first week or two, try and find some students that you vibe with, that you might want to form a study group, because if you can teach each other, you're going to learn the material more yourself. And something that Huberman says in the podcast is we can convince ourselves that we've learned something, when we've watched it over and over. But taking that extra step to put the knowledge into use and teach someone else can be the best test to see if you've actually retained it. So
I will jump in and share a little personal experience here. I attended a coffee and code meetup. I'd never gone to one before, but we're gonna do this thing, and I took my laptop, and a Code U student came and they asked me a question about one of the things, one of the assignments early on, and I couldn't quite get the code to work on his computer, but it also was kind of good for me to be like, oh yes, this is how I do this, and it reinforced that thing that I hadn't practiced for a year or 6 months or however long it's been since I took that part of the class. So, oh yes, the office hours for the mentors. Yes, they want to help you learn and have discussions about the materials.
So if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, try and take that motto: watch one, do one, teach one.
So a few other key learning components that Huberman talks about in the podcast. Our focus and attention is a limited but renewable resource. The longer you're awake, Jared, say it for me. Adenosine builds up in your system, and you get tired, and it limits your attention budget. So, you can train your nervous system to study and learn, and that sleep is needed to reset your focus and attention. And then having the consistent study schedule and the mindfulness practices. And then, of course, we mentioned just very briefly the hydration, having enough water and caffeine, the appropriate amount of caffeine for you. We're not saying don't have caffeine, and we're not saying have all the caffeine, the appropriate amount of caffeine for you. And then, of course, emotions really can affect the ability on how we learn new information, whether that's our own, emotions. I think we mentioned a little bit about, getting excited about a material that's not necessarily the most engaging. If you can get some emotion behind it, or find a good video that helps you understand something, or I don't know if pretending you're excited about something works in this case, but
fake it till you make it. That's a real thing.
But it is a skill to be able to focus and study. We don't naturally know how to do that.
Yeah. And, if you go down, or if you sit down to study and you feel yourself, super caffeinated, or your emotions all over the place, that's when you can use that non-sleep rest, that meditation, to kind of level yourself so you're ready to learn, and that you're in the right mind space. It's kind of part of that training your nervous system to prepare yourself to learn. So, yeah. And then, so for this, Huberman also encourages bringing outside examples, I can talk with my hands, sorry, stories, things like that into your learning. And he encourages using lived experience and trying to tie that into the concepts that you're learning, even if they're not relevant at all. The connections can still strengthen those neural pathways in your brain and make new connections that'll help offset that forgetting. While, for example, learning all of the notes in music, you don't, all cars eat grass is one way to kind of remember some of the notes on the scale. And while none of that is related to guitar, it's still, or to music, it still kind of builds that pathway in your brain, and you will never forget what the strings are on a bass instrument. So that's just one example.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's a
and he
good
also talks
example. I
about,
was thinking too, like there probably somebody here is like has some sort of one of those mnemonic things that they use for something coding related. I just can't come up with anything right now. So if anybody has any of those they want to share in the chat, would love to hear them.
yeah, or a way that you remember something that, you know, it's not even related to coding at all, but it helps trigger something else in your mind. We all have those things for different study habits. I'm just forgetting things I've used right now in the past. But yeah, always interweave information.
Oh, sorry.
It helps you kind of retain that information more and offsets the forgetting.
So whenever you started out the program here, you may have been at an unskilled level, maybe not, maybe a skilled level, but you know, the levels of learning, of course, is presented in the podcast. At this point, you all are skilled at least. You can use the information that you've learned in basic ways. So we're working towards mastery and continuing on, you know, to the point where you can use the knowledge you've developed in new and unusual ways. So innovative ideas. All right. So to recap,
Yeah,
these
there are
points.
kind of 5 main themes that we kind of pulled out of this podcast that we thought would be the best advice for you all. So if you don't retain anything from this podcast, I wish we had a quiz that we could test you right away.
That's what we were supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
That's
right. We should.
Yeah.
But these are the 5 most important points that we felt that you should take away from this podcast. And it's not, you know, so the best way to study and learn is not defined by the medium the material arrives, but to offset that forgetting process. How can I not forget this? And then that helps your brain kind of make connections or think of ways to trick yourself and offset forgetting. Another key theme in a lot of the research that Huberman presents in this podcast is that studying that feels challenging is actually the most effective. If you feel like what you're learning is hard or that you are really struggling with the material, turns out you will actually remember that more down the line, later down the line, if you put in the effort, because he talks about how effort and being actively engaged is the cornerstone of learning. Without active engagement, without putting in effort, and without, you know, sleep and everything else, you will not retain this information long term. Another key component that we talked about earlier is remembering your motivation for learning. Why are you here? So while the information that you're learning might not be the most interesting, might not be the most engaging, if you can keep a structured pattern to your studying and remember your motivation, why you're there, and stay focused in your routine, stay consistent in your routine, learning will happen. And then lastly, testing yourself very soon after your first exposure to the material will offset that natural forgetting process. And it consolidates, the way he phrases it is it consolidates the new information in your neural circuits. So those are kind of the key points that we took away from this podcast that we feel would help you in your learning, because this is not a traditional style of learning and most people might have been out of school for a while. So we just kind of wanted to present a different way to think about studying and how to learn for you all. Look at all these.
Oh yeah, I like that. I would test use the knowledge again after you've slept once. Yes, because that was a big point with the sleeping builds those circuits. So yeah, thank you all for coming tonight. Now, We want to open it up for discussion. Do folks have some comments, want to share experiences?
Yeah, we definitely recommend checking out the podcast. It's an hour and a half, so we wanted to kind of boil it down to something that was a little bit more digestible for you. But we greatly appreciate you all coming out today. Here are some resources that he mentions in the podcast. We'll share this out with you all. But was there anything else, Amanda, that you wanted to hit?
I will share this too. I'll drop this link in the chat real quick. This is a brief, of course, if you're interested in this type of thing, the neuroplasticity super protocol. So I don't know, is this topic stuff that other people have learned about before? Okay. All right. Well, read up on some of this. Oh, cars eat grass. Bass clef. Okay.
So someone called me out, so I had to correct myself.
Yeah. Now, also, of course, there's some yoga nidra stuff that you can always investigate and see how that works for you. I don't know. There are the non-sleep deep rest. Huberman also has a YouTube video and 10-minute things. So good stuff there.
Okay.
But,
well, do we want to open it up for kind of questions just about the program in general, or any comments that someone might have? And then we'll wrap up here in about 5 or 10 minutes or so.
I'll stop presenting if that seems. Does that seem all right? And I'll stop presenting now. And yeah.
I'll throw this out there. Hi, John Stokes, longtime mentor with Code Louisville, something like 8 years on and off now. Wow. I shared a link to a Coursera class. I know the last thing you guys want is another class and more videos, but it's a brilliant class on teaching yourself how to learn from Barbara Oakley, who has extreme learning disabilities and became an engineer following these methods and principles. She's not a technical type at all. So it's a really, really super good video if you're finding that you're struggling with technical stuff. I say video, it's an entire class. Covers a lot of the same things that you guys touched on here, but also offers some tools and some other approaches. So anyway, I'm throwing that link out there. Get the book, take the course, it's all free. Just thought I'd throw that out.
Thanks, John. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you remember some of the other things that it talks about in there that might be good for us to maybe mention tonight? I know there's lots of other ways to learn things. So
sure. So I'll try to keep this short, but one of the things that Barbara talks about is a concept she calls chunking. So you learn a little thing, and then you learn another little thing that immediately kind of tacks onto that. And then as you learn more and more things that kind of tack together, you can start to remember them just by remembering the first little thing. And I'm way under explaining that. But part of the process of that is that memory and recall. And one of the things that she points out is we remember things best if we can come up with a sound, a color, and a place to associate with things. And I will tie this into martial arts. I'm a former Taekwondo instructor. That's something they do in martial arts. You start every long series of movements they call a form facing the same direction. and it has a name that's a sound, usually in a foreign language, so that it's not a word that you have to remember, it's just a sound, and it's associated with the color of a belt. And it is much easier for people to remember it, but we also teach it following that chunking style. We teach you the first 2 steps, and then the first 3 steps, and then the first 5 steps, so you're chunking it together. And that's a philosophy that dates back thousands of years in teaching. And so those are some of the simple things that Barbara kind of covers and how to apply them to learning today. And I don't want to chew up all the time because I know people have questions, so I'll stop there.
No, that's great. Made me think of something else that Huberman talks about in this podcast that we didn't touch on. When you said chunking is to break up your study habits, or your study periods in like 40-minute blocks. Try not to do all of your studying at one time. Try and do it 2 or 3 times throughout the day if you have that ability. And that can solidify things a little bit better. But I like the building on top of each other idea as well.
Jenna,
Jenna, you've had your hands up for a while.
I don't know. Does anyone have any?
The closest thing that I can think of that he says is just basically training yourself to do it over and over. We will eventually like it.
I don't think that's true, though.
I don't know either, but yeah, he says you can train yourself to be excited about material just by telling yourself that you need to learn it. I don't know how successful that is personally.
Oh,
but
Monica, please. Yeah, Monica has something. And Amanda Wilson, she raised a hand. So, yeah, Jenna, go ahead. We hear that a lot. So, Monica, we're still recording this, huh? I don't know. Can you edit this part out? Here's what I would say. You can read the transcription of the video, fast forward to the last few minutes and let the video play out. And that will give you credit for watching the video. Now, does that give you, it doesn't?
try the last 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Yeah, maybe the last 5 minutes, maybe give it a little bit. But
other people have recommended finding a YouTube video on the same topic that just kind of presents it a little more exciting or in a different manner.
I definitely recommend that. If
Yeah.
you can see, like, if it's almost like getting a second or third opinion, right? Like if you can find somebody who can relate the material to you better, it's definitely going to reinforce it better. And I mean, I watched the videos through to the end, and some of them are a slog, especially in the software dev path. Like some of them are like 4.5, 5 hour videos, so they're massive. I do the activities with them a lot of the time because if it's more interactive, I'm going to pay more attention. There's like more at stake for me there, and I'll do better with it. But yeah, it can be hard to kind of follow along with some of that stuff. So I get that.
I'll also throw out there that if you're just trying to, if you think you understand the material and you're just trying to get through the video so you can move on, There's a tool out there called Video Speed Controller, and there's a bunch of different ones you can use to speed the video up to get to the parts you need. That's not an entire solution, but it may help.
Yeah, and coding along, like Lance said, is what we can recommend the most. And that's what Huberman says, coding along would be testing yourself. Just trying to relate it back to the presentation. But yeah, is finding outside resources as much as you can to kind of make it exciting, fast forwarding it, reading, the transcript. There's all kinds of creative ways to try and make the material a little more exciting.
I think I've seen a few questions about the career, the tech event requirement. And I maybe, if you are in the intro module right now, you don't have that yet, right, Monica? That comes out when you start your pathway.
I could not answer that one way or the other and be certain. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the tech event requirement hits in the pathways, but
Yeah, that's right. There isn't one in the intro.
Yeah.
But I think we can still count this down the line.
Yeah, just keep a note for yourself, and because you're like, is it 2 weeks till the pathways? The week of October 6th or whatever, whenever the pathways start. So I think that's acceptable to go ahead and just keep a note for yourself and submit that form. I don't think that anybody would object to that.
I would say though, they happen almost weekly. So
Yeah.
like there are so many opportunities to get one, and you really just need, I think was it one in the first two modules and then one in the second half?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many of them. And there's a lot of really interesting ones. So you're going to find one that's going to fulfill the requirement for you. So I wouldn't stress it.
Lance, to answer your question, he mentions breaking your study session up into a couple of blocks if you can, and then doing like the meditation between your study blocks, or actually like going for a walk, something to kind of distract yourself, but then bring your study back, is a helpful tool that he mentions in there.
Oh, the tech event requirement.
And go to more than one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the in-person ones are great too. But I mean, I still, like, every week I'm logging onto these things. We've got a great schedule lined up. And then there's lots of stuff that you can attend for tech events that's just posted, outside of Code U too, that
I think I've been to like 4 or 5 now, and I've never left one of them not like being like, wow, that was a waste. Like there's always something from it that it's like, wow, that was really cool, or I learned something new there, or that, I have a new resource, to look at or something like that. They've all been really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And if you're in Northern Kentucky and you don't want to go to an event by yourself, just reach out to me or maybe Monica, and one of us will probably go with you. I can't guarantee that all the time, but if you're scared or social anxiety is an issue or anything like that, just let one of us know.
Yeah, and I think I'll be at the same event as Jenna on Thursday. Yep. So, and David York will be there as well. That's at I don't have that on my list here, but we have information about that in the tech events. Lexington's is it the Cornerstone building? So I don't know if anybody on this call knows what I'm talking about, but there's an event on Thursday. So
Can you say that one more time? At the Cornerstone Building?
At the Cornerstone Building at UK. Let me
Oh, at UK. Okay.
yeah, do you need the event information? I can
I would love
find
to have it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think at this point, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, but if you want to, hop off and watch some of the football games that are on tonight, or eat dinner, anything like that, I think the bulk of what we want to talk about has wrapped up. But if you want to stay on and chat or have any questions about the program, we'll be around for a few more minutes.
Yeah, and I'm getting that link for that event here. I just had to get to my calendar. So
Wow, there's a big, huge 4-story building. It used to be a little building with Joseph Beth booksellers.
oh, okay.